what I'd like to do is introduce Ryan. First of all, for anybody who does not know me, I'm Elise Mitten or Alice Mitten, whichever one. And I'm the executive director for the Mid-Atlantic Community Papers Association, who has brought this event to you absolutely free as members of our association. So we have the opportunity to have with us. And if you don't know Ryan, I'm going to share with you a little bit about him. He is a top motivational speaker that won an Emmy for marketing excellence while working for ABC TV, Walt Disney Company, and was recognized by Forbes Company with the Best of the Web Award for business strategies. His focus is on leadership training and team performance development. With a passion for sales and marketing, we know that. It has given him the unique opportunity to touch $500 million in revenue for companies in 7 countries. Ryan is an internationally certified business coach, has trained over 30,000 professionals, and works monthly with companies in 15 business sectors. So it gives me great honor to introduce Ryan Dohrn. And now the crowd needs to clap and roar.
Yeah, that's outstanding. Well, thank you, Lisa.
I will let everybody. Have you been letting people in? Okay.
For the introduction, I was trying to be helpful.
Thank you so much
in the process. So, all right, friends, we're glad to be here and glad to be chatting with you today. And just because we've seen so many Zoom faux pas occur, don't forget, friends, to mute your line today to keep it nice and quiet for everybody else. And I can share a very brief, moderately amusing story about someone that their daughter came into the room and said, "Mom, I've got a question for you. Make sure you mute." And she said, "I am on mute. What do you want?"
Oh, no.
And it was so funny to hear the child say, "Mom, you're not on mute." "Yes, I am on mute." And she went to scolding the child. And it didn't work out so well. So, okay, let me get here and get my screen share and we'll get started with all of you today. So please don't forget to mute yourself. And the conversation is being recorded today, the webinar, for those of you that want to look back on it, or maybe you've got a colleague that has missed it. So just don't forget to keep the line quiet and keep yourself muted. Hey, friends, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, that's something I'd really love to encourage all of us to do here within the association and beyond. And the reason I think it's really important is because there's so much collective sharing that's going to occur during this webinar, after this webinar. So whether you're a Facebooker or you're a tweeter, but I mean, I prefer LinkedIn. I like, if Facebook went away, I could care less. As a matter of fact, it'd probably be good for all of our businesses. But LinkedIn is something that has been extremely helpful to me and to my business. And so I encourage all of you, let's all connect on LinkedIn and get that chain started. I think that'd be very, very helpful. All right, we are here today to talk about getting longer term contracts. And what it really comes down to is some new ideas and some new topics that and some thoughts that we really haven't talked about before. Now, it's great. I'm very, very fortunate to know a lot of you, to work with some of you in a professional manner, but there's a lot of information today that we've really never talked about. Now, I want to challenge you a little bit today to really keep an open mind, because friends, when we think about getting longer term contracts, more than likely what's going to have to happen is we're going to have to do something different. And if we don't do something different, probably we're going to get about the same result. All right, this is the time of year that a lot of us might refer to as contract season or fall renewal season or whatever that little circumstance is. And that's why it's important for us to be talking through what are the things that we can do differently that will get us further, faster. That really is the thought behind our conversation today. So, all right, if you got questions that are relevant to the conversation today, chat those across to us. And then if you need to be unmuted, let Elise know, and she's more than happy to, if we have a comment or a question that needs to come in. Okay. All right. Take some notes. I'm going to give you some challenging thoughts today. Here we go. Focus point number 1 on getting longer term contracts. The first thing is to recognize that 60% of people out there, advertisers out there, people that we're selling to, whether it's a local mom and pop, or it's going to be a regional company, or maybe a few of those national players, 60% of people make purchases because of FOMO. So we all know what FOMO is. FOMO is that fear of missing out. Okay. The fear of missing out. Now, why that's important? It's important because if we recognize that people are not just waking up in the morning hoping to buy something from us, and we recognize what FOMO really does and means to all of us, we can actually restructure the way that we set up all of our sales calls to make sure that we're really doing a really great job of driving FOMO. Here's something I'd love for you to consider. I want to make every advertiser that I meet with, I want to make them feel like they're the only one that's not advertising with me. Now, granted, that's probably not the circumstance or the case, but let me just give you this thought. What if we could structure our conversations? We could structure our presentations to make someone feel like they're the only business in our community that's not advertising. Now, that's obviously not a perfect reality. And we recognize that, but it's important, friends, for us to really think this through. What can we do? What can we say to make an advertiser feel like maybe they're the only one that's not advertising? That would really be understanding what FOMO really is. Now, this is an example it's a magazine example, but I love the example. And a lot of folks refer to this as logo soup, if you will. And I love logo soup. Logo soup tastes really, really great. When I am from an advertising dollars perspective, when I'm meeting with an advertiser, one of the first things that I like to pull out, besides my paper, my magazine, my publication, whatever it is that you're selling, is I like to pull out my logo soup. And the reason I do this is I want to showcase those businesses that have been advertising with us over the last couple of years. Now, depending upon the level of your ethical barometer, some people will show people that have advertised within the last 3 to 5 years. I think it would be a little more ethical, in my opinion, maybe within the last year or so, because people come back and forth. The idea behind this is to drive FOMO. If you're a bank, I want to see, oh, wow, okay, you've got Atlantic Union and you've got Wells Fargo and you've got so-and-so and such and such. If you're a private school, or if you're a restaurant or a family dentist office or something along those lines. And what I want to do is I want to talk really positively and really favorably about all of these individuals. I might even say, are you familiar with Riverside? Well, I am. Riverside has been advertising with us on and off for the last 2 or 3 years, loving what they're doing with us. Are you familiar with Bay Creek? I am. Well, Bay Creek is another business that's been advertising with us on and off for the last few years, loving what we're doing together in print and digital, etc. And then what I like to do is just kind of walk through this logo soup and talk about the business owners that are advertising with us, those folks that are seeing good success, whatever that means. And what I also like to do is just really focus in on what can I do to accentuate the logo soup? What kind of spice can I add to it to make that logo soup be everything it can be? Now, another way to handle this is specifically in the newspaper space is to actually tag in advance the pages of your paper and walk through the paper and point to various advertisers. Now, let's back up one little bitty step. When I'm on a sales call, there's a lot of different things that I'm going to do. And the first thing I'm going to do is validate time. I'm going to say, hi, Bonnie, thanks for the 20 minutes. Do you still have 20 minutes? She says, sure. Thank you so much. One of the first things I'd love to do, Bonnie, is I'd love to share with you some examples of businesses like yours, some businesses large and small that have been advertising with us on and off for the last several years and we're really enjoying working together. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so that's fine. But what if they say to me, how much does Atlantic Union Bank spend? Or what kind of digital results did Virginia Family Dentistry get with you? My answer is always the same. Bonnie, I'm not at liberty to share with you the intimate details of these businesses' ad campaigns with us, but I can tell you in general what a dentist or a bank or a family physician or a restaurant or something would do. I can give you an idea in general, make you some recommendations of what we would suggest for you to mimic their success or be very successful. One of the things I've noticed in communities large and small, and I have the opportunity to work with free and subscription-based papers all across the United States, is whenever you move to a model of using FOMO, logo soup, talking about other businesses in an ethical way, you almost always sell more. And the reason is because of the reality of marketing. There's a reality to market in the greater Augusta, Georgia area where I live. There's a reality. Now, I live in a little town called Beach Island, South Carolina. There is no beach, and it's not an island, but it does sound good. A one-way conversation with an advertiser is going to that advertiser in my area and saying, tell me what you're doing about marketing. Tell me what you need. Tell me what your goals are. Now, it sounds good, but in the end, you never get as big a contract. You never get as much from that advertiser as when you actually compare and contrast them to others. Now, I want to be very, very clear. I am not suggesting to you in any way, shape, or form that you have an unethical conversation with advertiser A about advertiser B, C, and D. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. What I'm suggesting to you is that you actually don't have a one-way conversation with advertiser A where all you do is talk about them. You're always going to get more money from someone when you begin to encourage them on what it looks like to keep up with the Joneses, what it looks like to actually be an active advertiser like company B, company C, or company D. When you begin to have conversations with folks and you begin to be able to share with them what others in the community are doing to be successful, what it does is it forces somebody to grapple with the conversation of, maybe I'm the only one that's not doing enough. Or, I guess I should try what others have tried. If it worked for them, it might potentially work for me. Now, friends, we got a lot more conversation to have here today, but at the basis of the conversation, it's important for you to understand that salespeople like me, like you, I sell about $1 million a year myself in local, national, digital, print, podcasts, events, you name it. When I talk ethically about the other advertisers that I love, when I talk about the reality of marketing in my area, and I get out of this one-way conversation where all I'm talking about is what they need, well, the situation is I almost always make more money. And as we talk through it today, I think it'll become even more vividly clear. So one of the questions, I have 3 or 4 questions that I always like to ask my advertisers when I'm meeting with them. And it draws out a lot more than asking them their budget or asking them what marketing they're doing right now. I prefer to ask a question like this. When you agreed to meet with me, what problem were you hoping that I could solve? When you agreed to meet with me, there must be something going on with your business that you felt like, I think Ryan in the paper, Ryan in that publication, Ryan and that website, I think that this guy can help me. Think through this, friends. Nobody out there in advertiser land said, I'm going to grant Ryan Dohrn from such and such a publication a meeting today. I'm going to give him 60 minutes of my valuable day. I don't really care what he has to say, but I'm curious about what he has to say. Okay, that's not the reality of the people we're meeting with. The people, the advertisers we're meeting with, whether it's a mom and pop, a regional business, maybe a statewide business, a cross-county business, the reality is the advertisers we're meeting with, they've got problems. They've got problems that you can probably help them solve. Maybe it's retaining business, getting business back, protecting the business that they have. There's a lot of different things that we do. We're going to talk about it today. But when they agreed to meet with you, there's something within their business that's going on that they believe you can help them solve a problem or help them with. If they didn't think that you could be helpful to them, they wouldn't have granted you that meeting. Very unlikely that someone's like, I like Ryan, I'll give him an hour. Most people don't have an hour to give. That's why I really like this question. Now, the next question I like to ask is all about setting expectations. If we could create the perfect marketing campaign for you, what do you want to see happen from that campaign? If we could create the perfect marketing campaign for you, what would you like to see happen from that campaign? Now, I'm going to bet, because I'm not actually going to bet, because I'll win the bet and I don't want to take money. It's like stealing candy from a child, from a baby. If I asked this question, how many times has an advertiser said to you, yeah, I ran that ad with you and I didn't get much out of it? Or they said, I ran those 3 ads with you. I got no ROI. Now, one person came through the door and brought that paper with them. Well, it's all about managing expectations, right? Because what we're selling, and I'd love for you to make note of this, what we're selling is marketing. We're not selling magic. And a lot of times what advertisers think they're buying from us is something magical. Quite honestly, we sell marketing solutions, and our marketing solutions really are not that magical. As a matter of fact, most marketing solutions aren't all that magical. Marketing is something that takes time to work. It does require an effort and budget to really make happen. And as we all know, it requires a certain level of ad size and frequency. See, one of the things I like about banner ads on website, I refer to banner ads, jot this down, as affordable frequency. Not a lot of people click on banner ads. So what I like to say is it's affordable frequency. It's a way that you can stay in front of somebody over and over and over and over again, wherever they are online. Banner advertising to me is affordable frequency. Same thing with newspaper ads. You will not find a more cost-effective way on a cost per thousand basis to reach folks than on a frequency basis than print advertising. You just won't. People say, oh, it's a lot more expensive than everything else. Well, if you don't mind me asking, what are you comparing it to? Well, Facebook. Oh, okay. So I understand why you might be inclined to create an apples to apples comparison between Facebook and our newspaper, but it's more like an apples to salmon comparison. Like, we're both foods, we're just in 2 different food groups. To try to compare a like on Facebook to an actual human being picking up this publication and actually looking through it, they're both foods. They're just 2 different food groups. So what I would encourage you to do is look at Facebook and evaluate Facebook for what it is, a piece of the puzzle. Look at the newspaper and evaluate what it is, evaluate it for what it is as a piece of the puzzle. See, a lot of times you try to compare 2 things that are completely wrong. See, I like this one, and you've heard me mention this one before. When you think about marketing your business, do you want to kind of have a basic presence in our community? Or do you want to be a little more competitive? Or do you want to really dominate inside of our community, within the businesses within our community? Where would you like to be seen? Sort of a put your toe in the water, be a little more competitive, or would you really like to be really dominant out there? Now, the reason that I love this one, I love this question, is because I want to really find out, where does someone really see themselves as they think about competing in their community? Now, we'll talk about objections here in a second, but this is more along the lines of, when you think, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner, when you think about advertising here within our community, do you want to kind of be a small business, kind of a medium business, a big dominant business? Kind of where do you want to fall? Now, let's just say that they say, well, I'd like to be pretty competitive, kind of right there in the middle. Well, then it might lead me to a question like this. Well, what company out there or competitor do you feel does a really good job of marketing? You want to be kind of right there in the middle. You don't want to be one of the big dogs, and you don't want to be one of the little teeny fish in the pond. You kind of want to be right there in the middle. Who do you feel in that little sector there? Who do you feel does a great job? And when they say somebody, well, what do you like about what they're doing? What do you like? What do you not like about what they're doing? See, friends, what I'm trying to get you to understand is there's 3 questions that normally get asked on a sales call that don't lead to long-term contracts. They just don't. one of those questions is, what's your budget? See, when you ask someone, follow me on this, when you ask somebody, what's your budget, you're asking them to give you a number so that you can create a media proposal that lives within their reality of what it takes to market in your community, your region, your state, or whatever. See, the reason I don't ask someone, what's your budget? It's not that I don't care what their budget is, but I recognize that their budget or their idea of what it takes to advertise in our community is their reality. It's not the reality. It's their reality. Now, a lot of times they'll say, I don't have a budget. I don't know what my budget is, or they'll give you a number. Well, my budget is $200 a month. You know, hey, buddy, don't make your payments so high, is what I'd like to say. $200 a month. They pull out of thin air because they don't recognize the reality of marketing in your community. There's a reality. So if you're a realtor in your community where you live, there's a reality to marketing. Realtors that are dominant in the market do 5 or 6 things. Maybe they do everything that you have to offer, and they do billboards, and they do the high school football stadium, and they buy the sides of a couple of local folks that drive cars around or something like that. There's a reality. Dominant people do dominant things. Competitive businesses do competitive things. Usually it's just a little bit less than the dominant folks. And then you've got those minnows at the bottom that like to just put their toe in the water, and they all do about the same thing. They buy ads now and again. They're really big on Facebook, or they think they're big on Facebook. There's things that these folks do. There's a reality to each one of those levels of play. So when I'm walking someone through this line of questioning, and it starts with, when you agreed to meet with me, what were you hoping I could help you with? Okay, great. If I could create the perfect marketing campaign for you, what would you want to see happen? Finding out, what do they want to see? What is the result? What is the end result? How am I going to be judged as an ad sales rep? Well, when you think about marketing here in our community, do you want to be really dominant like so-and-so, or kind of in the middle like such and such, or just kind of dip your toe in the water like so-and-so? I like to name businesses. What I'm trying to help everybody on the webinar today understand is that the reality of marketing in your community is real, but most advertisers don't understand the reality. Because the reality is, if we could help you bring in one new customer, just one, what would that mean to you? What would that look like to you? Or what is one new client worth to you? That's what it really comes down to for almost every business, helping them bring in new customers. Now, there's a sad but true reality here in all of this, and that is, folks, that they think we're only good for one thing, bringing in new business. But here's what I'd love for you to make note of. That's a fallacy. It's false. It's false thinking. If nothing else, it's short-sighted thinking. Sure, we can help people bring in new business, but there's actually 2 other things that we're excellent at as well. So when I get pigeonholed, or I get thrown into this trap, and all of you have fallen into this trap at one time or another, someone will say, oh, I'm good. I've got plenty of business. I don't need new business. I've been in this town for 25 years. No need to advertise, right? We've all heard it before. That's because they're pigeonholing you. They think you're a one-trick pony, that all you do is bring them new business. Oh, no. There's 2 other things we also do. The second thing that we do is we help businesses re-engage with their past customers. So the first thing we do is bring them some new business. That's great. The second thing we do is help them re-engage with customers they've had in the past. Then there's a third thing that we do. It's called protecting their turf. We help people protect the brand and the business that they've built over years from other competitors. Let's walk through those 3 things again. First, help them bring new business. Great. Our advertising can do that. The second thing is we help them re-engage with past customers. Like right now, I've switched to a different type of grill that I cook on. So I've got pretty much every outdoor cooking device known to mankind. My wife doesn't complain because we split the duties around here. I do almost all the cooking, so she doesn't care what I buy outside for cooking as long as it tastes good, right? Well, re-engaging with customers means that there's businesses in this town where I live in this area that sell the things I need for my outdoor cooking apparatuses. and I don't remember all the places I've even shopped, but I'll tell you what, if you're going to give me a deal, I'll buy wood pellets or charcoal, depending on what I'm doing from a different place, if I'm going to get a deal. But I haven't been to a lot of these places in a long time. Re-engagement. But then the third thing that everyone forgets about is protecting your turf. Protecting your turf is all about reminding customers, thanking customers, just helping the community remember I am the best. So, for example, let's just say there's an insurance broker that says to you, hey, I've been in this town for 25 years. I don't need to advertise. Well, what about those new insurance brokers that might pop up here one day or down the street or around the corner, offering lower prices, a lot more aggressive than you? What are you doing to make sure that nobody thinks it's okay to come after you? Protecting your turf, retaining customers, thanking customers. That's the third piece of the puzzle. So much more that we do than just bringing in new customers. Getting longer term contracts, which is our conversation today, first and foremost really focuses on the reality of marketing, helping advertisers understand there is a reality to marketing in our community, our town, whatever. And the reality is this: there's 3 different levels: a basic level, a competitive level, and a dominant level. Where do you want to be? Which playground do you want to play on? Which car do you want to drive? Whatever the circumstance is, however you want to say it. Okay, getting longer term contracts, focus point number 2. So you'll always get about a 70% higher conversion rate when you recommend a product. You'll almost always get a 70% higher conversion rate when you recommend a product. See, one of the problems is over the course of sales, your sales life, you've been taught to ask questions like, tell me about your needs, tell me about your goals, tell me about your desires. Well, the problem with that is you give people what they want. Well, isn't that what you want? No. When you give somebody what they want and you don't give them what they need, you have a customer for about 3 months. When you guide someone through recommendations towards what they actually need, now you've got a customer for a lifetime. See, what the problem is in the newspaper business, magazine business, print business in general, is that we've been giving people what they want because we ask them the wrong questions. We figure out what they want. We give them what they want. They don't know any better. And what I do is I come in behind you and I give them what they need, and I get a customer for a lifetime because I recommend to them what works. We know what works. This is what you've got to do. And if they don't want to do it, we turn them down. What? I'd rather turn somebody down than let somebody down. A very, very smart newspaper person, Kevin James from Texas, Mosier Community Media, one of his favorite sayings: I'd rather turn you down than let you down. Because if you give somebody what they want, you've got a customer for 3-4 months. If you give them what they need, if you guide them towards what they need, then all of a sudden, by recommending products, you've got a customer for a lifetime. And that really is where success stories come into play, testimonials. Finding out what's working, talking to your advertisers in vivid detail, getting studies from them, getting understanding from them, asking them for referrals, spending a lot of time really understanding, okay, why did this ad work? Why didn't it work? When did this ad run? What was the promotion they were featuring? Did 15% off work? Did a buy one, get one work? When did they run it? It's called paying attention to what works. And when you figure out what works, then you can rinse and repeat that for other advertisers. Remember, if John Doe runs his ad with you for 7 months, in the 8th month, you can look back and see what he did or didn't do and go to the next advertiser and say, hey, I know what works. Because it worked for him, it's probably going to work for you, ma'am, as well. Let me give you an example. An example would be, here's 3 grocers. Okay, so you've got Kroger, H-E-B, and IGA. Now, Kroger is a dominant player in our area, and here's the things that Kroger does. I'm not saying you're going to give this to an advertiser. I suppose you could. HEB is a little more competitive. They're not dominant, nor do they try to be dominant like Kroger. Here's the things that they do. Then you've got IGA. And in my area, IGA is not very prominent. They're kind of a basic grocery store, and they do basic things. HEB is a little more competitive. Kroger is clearly really dominant. Look at all the things that they do. So I have the ability then to go to another type of business that has a similar customer and say, hey, do you know the size of Kroger and what Kroger does? Here's the 6 or 7 things that they do. Do you like what IGA is doing? Here's the 3 or 4 things that they do. This gives you a general understanding of the ammunition that it takes to get the job done, or the recipe for the perfect stew. HEB's stew is competitive. They've got a competitive stew. And here's the 5 or 6 things that they put in the stew to make their stew work for them. IGA, that's their recipe for success. And there's Kroger's recipe for success. Same kind of thing could apply to insurance. Same type of thing could apply to automotive, restaurants, outdoors, people doing landscaping work, home painting, doctors, etc. When you look back at your sales life, there are certain things that certain advertisers do, and all of it is public information. Ooh, they run a weekly full-page ad. That's not secret, people. I don't know why we're acting like we're selling FBI or NSA spy secrets here. Once something has run, it's public information, and we can use that data to go forward and make recommendations to others. Let's just pretend for a second that across the top of the sheet here were 3 realtors, one that's dominant, one that's competitive, and one that's more basic, kind of present. I'm talking to a 4th realtor. So I'm talking to Susie Smith. Susie, when you think about marketing as a realtor in our area, do you kind of want to have a basic presence like Dean Smith? Do you want to be a little more competitive like Shannon Rollins? Or do you want to be really dominant like Lily Youngblood? Well, I like what Shannon Rollins does, so I guess right there in the middle. Okay. Someone like Shannon would do these 5 or 6 things with us. It's worked for her in the past. I see no signs of her letting up in the future. So if you want to be sort of like her, sort of like what she does, these are the 3, 4, 5, 6 things that we would recommend. And then you show them how that would price out. See, the reason a lot of you're like, oh, nobody's committing to longer term contracts. The reason people aren't committing is because typically we sell it wrong. We ask them how long do they want to commit. And what we do is we try to give them a discount to commit longer. It's not about the discount. I mean, it is about the discount, but it's not about the discount. The discount's great, but you're going to give the discount to anybody that's going to run. What it's really for a long period of time, what it's really about is, does the advertiser understand the reality of marketing in your community? Have you helped them identify, do they want to have a basic presence, be competitive, or be dominant? Have you helped them figure it out? And once they figure out they want to be competitive, did you guide them with a proposal to the right pricing that's going to make sense? Because if someone says, I want to be competitive, and you know that that's $800 a month, and they've told you their budget is $50, okay, the reality is $50, you might as well take that $50 and take somebody out to lunch or a dinner. You're going to get more satisfaction out of that $50 than running one ad with me. I'd rather tell people that than take their $50, one ad, the smallest ad you got, probably not going to work for them. Then they're going to tell 50 friends, because bad news spreads a lot faster than good news. Now, one of the things I like, this is from, I believe, a shopper, and they are on the Upper East Coast. This is their CVC data. And what they've done with their CVC data is helped dentists understand the reality of what their readership looks like. This is a reality check. The reality check is we've got 39,000 households. With our 37,000, we're reaching about 97% of our area. 7,285 of these people have no dentist. That's what our CVC data is telling us. So when you look at the months on the right, so that's 437 local mouths out there. When you look on the right at the seasonal display of when these ads kind of run, this is how much it would cost per month for you to potentially run with us, or per mouth to potentially be quite successful. This is a reality check. The reality is this is the number of people that we have. This is the number of mouths that we have. This is the margin of profit. On the gross revenue of $786,000, this is how much you should commit if you want to break even or if you want to get a nice ROI. Now, this one sheet is not necessarily designed for those that are faint of heart. I mean, they really can't do math. If you recognize you're dealing with somebody that's pretty darn basic, maybe you don't pull this out. But this is all about the reality of who's out there in the marketplace, using your audit data, if you have access to that, using your audit data to create some really compelling one sheets to help people understand this is the reality. The reality is 437 mouths and an annual spend of $1,800. For you, that's $786,600. At a 30% margin, that's $235,000 in your pocket. And this is all we're asking for. Other dominant dentists in the area, this is what they do. And this is how we calculate it for them. Now, I wish we could always have perfect science. I wish the math would always work out. In the end, 2 and 2 is 4, but to most advertisers, 2 and 2 is like a -6. They just don't believe. So that's why it's important for us to be able to share success stories of others, case studies of things that have worked. Take along spec ads, sample ads, whatever your circumstance is. Nowadays, we can outsource the creation of spec ads or use companies like Metro, or outsource through companies like OpenLook. You can have spec ads turned around in less than 24 hours. And they look pretty darn good. Just remember, folks, we've got to paint a picture of potential. Focus point number 3, getting longer term contracts. Most salespeople sell the way that they want to be sold. Most salespeople sell the way that you want to be sold. So there's 3 types of people out there. Okay. The first step is to recognize that you might have a problem with this. Okay. There's 3 types of buyers out there. We've talked about it a little bit before. There's ego-driven buyers, there's logical-driven buyers, and there's emotional buyers. Now, what's interesting about all of this is I'd love for you to take a wild guess as to how much each of these categories occupies. Like, for example, we know that out there right now in good old Main Street USFA, about 5% of buyers are ego-driven. We know this because I've got over 300 salespeople filling out an online survey every Friday, answering this question: what was the most prominent type of buyer you met with this last week? Was it an ego-driven buyer, a logical buyer, or an emotional buyer? Now, the logical side of things, well, you've got, unfortunately, you've got somewhere around 35% of people buy from a logical point of perspective right now, as of 2 Fridays ago. Last Friday, I was out of town. So you've got about 60 some odd percent of folks, essentially 60+% of folks that are in the emotional mindset. Here's the thing to remember about this, friends, is that you probably don't know exactly who you are. So if you want to get a longer term contract from somebody, you've got to sell to them in a way that makes the most sense to them. So if you are an individual that when you buy things, you use a lot of research, a lot of reasoning behind it, you're a very logical buyer, probably you sell in a logical way. Now me, I'm an emotional buyer. I buy things because they make me, the way they make me feel. That's dangerous because sometimes I buy things that are more expensive because it makes me feel good about buying it. 60 some odd percent of people out there are like me. So if I'm selling, I'm a pretty good shot that I'm going to come across somebody that's pretty emotional. That's just how it is. Now, remember during the midst of COVID phase 1, the first piece of COVID raging, that emotional number, during COVID got to be as high as 78%. It changes as economic uncertainty occurs, COVID, etc. We're into whatever you want to call it, sort of the Delta phase 2 COVID of the pandemic. And I just heard there's another MIU or MUI variant that's popped up. I don't think it's probably ever going to completely go away no matter what we do. But thankfully, we've kind of figured out ways to either live with it, deal with it, or be as safe as we can, right? Okay, so the point I'm trying to make here is that you might be somebody that's like, I'm a little bit logical and I'm a little bit emotional. Okay, well, if that's the case, if you can't decide, then you're emotional, because logical people know. If you can't decide, you're emotional. You're in that 60%. Okay, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because let's just say you're a logical buyer. You're probably a logical seller. So what you're doing is you're trying to use your logic on an emotional person. If you're going to get a longer term contract, you've got to understand that's a futile exercise. Think of it like this. Unfortunately, have you ever had an experience with a friend, relative, spouse, partner, whatever, where they've had too much to drink and you're like, hey, you need to give me your keys because you've had too much to drink? No, I'm fine. You're not fine. I can tell you're not fine. Give me your keys. Oh, I'm good to drive. Leave me be. I'm good. The more you try to logic with an emotional person, okay, the less likely it is you're going to win. Recognize that. If you're a logical person trying to sell to an emotional person, you've got to stop the logic drip. The logic drip is you trying to logic them through something that's an emotional decision for them. Logical buyers like data, facts, and stats. Emotional people like success stories because they want to feel like they're not the only one out there that's buying something, not the only one out there that's in business. So this point is recognize who you are. You may need to change who you are, so to speak, in your presentation style, your materials, when you realize you're dealing with a highly emotional person. How will you know? You'll know because logical people are pretty obvious. What are your stats? What's your readership? What's your pass along? What's your distribution? Let me see that CVC data. Oh, I like that. Can I take that home? I'd like to read that. Emotional people, when you pull out data sheets, are like, oh, wow. You can tell it in their eyes. It's a lot of data. When you share a success story or mention another business you're working with, they're like, oh, yeah, I like that person. How about the ego people? What do you do with the ego folks? You just stroke the ego, tell them that they're great. They're probably not going to buy much from you anyway because they're the smartest person that's out there walking. Just recognize that. Number 4, getting longer term contracts. Once you recognize who you are, the reality of marketing in your community is about you showing them what the spend levels look like. And you can do that in the form of your pricing grid. Now, I have not 1 ounce of empirical data, not 1 ounce, that shows that by leaving a meeting to go back to the office to create a proposal, to go back and chase somebody down is going to get you more money. What I do have data on is this: recognizing that my sellers, like you, that go to a meeting knowing the category the advertiser is in and coming with 3 pricing options ready to go, 65% is the close rate on people that do it right. 65%. That's double the national average. The national average close rate in media sales is about 35%, meaning you can sell about 3 in 10. Folks that come with pricing options ready to go, based upon the category that they're selling, moving to a recommendation-based selling model, as opposed to a, hi, I'm here to gather data on you, and then I'll go back to create a proposal, and then I'll come back to you. It just sounds like a long process. We're closing about 6 in 10. That's really high. Now, I can't promise you that. There's results not always typical at the very bottom of the screen. It'll be in the disclaimer at the end. But if I identify that I'm going to meet with a retail type store, and I know what others have done to be dominant, competitive, or basic, then I can come to them with recommendations ready to go. This might be the example with your paper. I'm going to a retailer, and this retailer sells furniture. I start out the sales call. Hi, Bill, how you doing? Thanks for the 20 minutes. Do you still have 20 minutes? By the way, side note, there is no sales call that takes an hour. If it's taking you an hour to talk about what you have to sell, you're doing something wrong. It doesn't take an hour. I promise. You're asking a lot of open-ended questions that don't need to probably be asked. All right. Hi, Bob. Thanks for the 20 minutes. Do you still have 20 minutes? Yes, Ryan, I sure do. Great. Bob, I'd love to briefly share with you several examples of other retailers that we've worked with that have been very successful. Is that okay? Sure, Ryan. And then I talk about them. And I say, oh, this guy over here is dominant. You know, he's going to run weekly full page ads with us. He's in our newsletter. He does some on our website, some banner ads. We do some social media for him. And we also do some lead gen. Now, this person over here in the furniture business, they're pretty darn competitive. Don't spend as much with us as the other guy, but they, pretty darn competitive. They run half-page ads with us every week. They're in our newsletter. They're on our website. We do a little bit of social for them. And then here's somebody's a little more basic. They run on and off seasonally, but they're, just kind of depends on what they've got going on. Where do you feel, Bob, like you want to be? Do you want to have kind of a basic presence, be a little more competitive like so-and-so, be dominant like so-and-so? What are you kind of thinking? Well, Ryan, kind of somewhere right there in the middle. Awesome. I really think that's a good idea. And that's what I was going to recommend for you anyway. That's more along the lines of about a $600 a month proposition. How does that feel to you? And folks, what I'm doing, friends, is I'm cutting to the chase. See, what a lot of times you try to do out there is you make it harder to buy from you than it really actually has to be. It doesn't have to be this hard. Most people out there just want to know how much is it and will it work? That's what they want to know. I've actually been on meetings with newspaper reps where the number of people that read the newspaper doesn't even come up. They already know the paper. They know the paper. They've seen it in the shopper or whatever. They've seen it in their community for 35 years. You're not there to convince them that you're a legitimate business. How much is it? Does it work? Now, you might say, Ryan, that's way too simple. I've been doing this 35 years. Friends, I've been doing this 30 years. This is the simplest I've ever had it. It's the easiest I've ever had to sell. I'm telling you. Well, other than the 80s. Before Facebook, it was a lot easier. I do give you that. But this is the easiest way that I found to sell. How much is it? What do you got? See, there's this whole thought process that you have to have this relationship with somebody to sell them something. I love relationships. I love my advertisers. I've been in some of their weddings. I actually became a sort of an ordained minister to marry one of my advertisers. You can do that online too. Marryyourfriends.com. I don't know if it's completely legit, but anyway, they're still together. So we'll leave it at that. I'm making it simple. Hey, if you want to be dominant like so-and-so, you're talking $800 a month. If you want to be competitive like so-and-so, you're talking like $500-600 a month. If you want to have a basic presence with us, you're talking $400 a month. Well, Ryan, my budget is $250. For $250, I'd advise you to take your spouse, partner, whatever, out to a really fancy dinner. I think you're going to get a lot more satisfaction out of that. I'm not ugly. I'm not mean. I'm not arrogant. It's just the reality. The reality is, how much is it? Does it work? It's pretty straightforward. You just make it harder than that. Now, does this idea and concept work better on newer advertisers than older advertisers? Yes, because your old advertisers, you've taught them to buy the hard way, that you have to ask them all these questions. Newer advertisers, especially younger buyers, they don't know any better. Cut to the chase and get to it. And restructure your proposals. Point number 5. Restructure your proposals, your templates to really enhance FOMO, make them feel like, oh man, I'm the only one not advertising. So what I do is I try to build my proposals so they buy option number 2. So when I write it out, okay, before I showed you the grid, I wrote it out. Well, what I do is I try to design option number 2, that one right in the middle. It's called the Goldilocks rule or the Goldilocks principle. All right, up here at the top, okay, that's your porridge is too hot. Up here at the top, okay, this means up here, your porridge, this is too hot up here. The Goldilocks principle would say you want this down here to look way too cold, like yuck. Okay, I don't want that one. You want to make this one look like, ooh, yeah, nobody likes this one because it's cold porridge. This one right here, oh yeah, this one here makes me smile. This one is just right. It's a bad smiley face. Sorry. It looks almost evil. Sorry about that. Let me cross that out. Here we go. Smiley face. Okay. You design the package so that they hopefully will buy the one in the middle. That's really the goal. Now, don't get focused on the pricing that's here. Okay. This is just generic pricing for the basis of a template. Your pricing could be completely and utterly different, and that's perfectly okay. Now, if you're selling website design or something highly specialized, maybe you do need to go to the office. But when you're putting together proposals, I like to put them together in advance based on what others in that category have done to be successful. Do you actually have time to go back to the advertiser 3 or 4 times to create a proposal? Do you actually go on sales calls and learn something from your advertiser? I would say in the last 6 months, I haven't learned a lot from my advertisers, and I have been listening. What I have resoundingly found, whether I'm working with Adams Publishing Group across the country, Mosier Community Media in Texas, Western News and Information, 24 Papers over in Arizona, whatever the circumstance is, when I go in and I recommend stuff, it almost always works out better. It doesn't matter if I'm doing the Genesee Valley Penny Saver or if I'm working with a small community paper down in Florida. When I recommend, I almost always get more, almost always, because I'm guiding people towards the reality of marketing. The reality of marketing really is this. The sales funnel is super, super weak. They just don't know it. So this is what it kind of looks like. Out there in the community where you live, there are 3 types of people that live out there, meaning there's 3 types of mindsets towards buying things. Now, let me ask you this. I want you to think about this, and I'm going to give you the answer. When you think about this, how many people would you think in your community right now are ready to make a decision to buy something? What percentage would you say of people are ready to buy something? What percentage of your people, your readers, do you think are interested and they're doing some research right now? And then what percentage basically are saying, nope, not interested right now? What do you think it is? I think the one to focus on is this right down here in the bottom. How many folks do you think are ready to say, yes, I'm ready to buy something? Now, your reality is probably that this down here is probably about 25%. That's probably your reality. Someone's looking to say yes. Your advertisers, though, they think that this number 20, not 25%, they think it's 90%. They think almost everybody's ready to buy, and they aren't wrong. So what do you think those percentages are? And then I'll give you the answer. What do you think they are? The answer is this. About 3 to 5% of folks out there ready to buy something. They don't know exactly, but they're ready to do something. About 40% are looking. They're still not ready to buy. 56% are not ready to do anything. More than half are like, not going to do anything. What's interesting is that most of your advertisers, when you point this out, it's flipped. They think 50, 60, 70% are ready to do something. See, you're in one of these little categories. So right now, my lease on my car is going to be up in April. I'm not going to lease again. I'm driving a little bit too many miles, going back and forth to Atlanta and Charlotte. So I'm not going to lease again. So I'm in that 3 to 5% that's going to buy something in April. So right now I'm in that middle group, that interest. I'm interested in looking at different vehicles and things like that, but I'm not going to move to the decision phase until April because I'm not going to buy before my lease is up, even though they keep incentivizing me to do that. My wife is like, no, sir. You will not be buying anything till April. They're not going to pull that game on us again, that trick. So I think it is important for us to recognize when we're talking with advertisers, there is 96% of people are in that interest and awareness stage. That's why advertising works. You just have to remain top of mind. You have to stay at the top of that funnel as often as you possibly can. When you think about that, friends, and you really get them on board with that, you really do have a winning scenario. You could ask them, how much budget do they dedicate to each phase of that sales funnel? You could ask them that, but they probably are not going to know really, what that looks like. In the end, this is what it really kind of comes down to. If we're going to get longer term contracts with our advertisers, we're going to have to do something different. If you keep selling traditional media in traditional ways, you're probably going to get traditional results. So here would be my challenge, and maybe you want to chat it across, maybe you want to just think about it. What is it that you're going to do different? What would be the things based upon this conversation today that you're going to you're going to do different. Maybe it's structuring proposals differently. Maybe it's talking more about the present, competitive, and dominant. Maybe it's using your CVC data a little bit better. Maybe it's asking different questions. There's so many different things you can do based on our conversation today, but you do have to do something different. And if you do that difference, find that difference, friends, you will find greater long-term advertising success, and you'll get longer-term contracts from everybody that's out there. All right, so let me take a couple. Is there Elise, were there any chat questions that came across? Yes, we are going to be recording the conversation. Yep. Did any other questions come across that we need to make sure we get answered?
No. They're all in awe.
Oh, that's good. Well, and I would encourage you folks, there's a lot of different stuff there. Find one thing and sink your teeth into it. And just remember, if you're at any point in this conversation went, ooh, I don't know. Yeah. Normally, right before you grow, that's the pain that you feel. You're always like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Hit the wall.
Yep. Let's see. Do you think that LinkedIn Premium is useful for selling to advertisers, at least getting appointments? Good question from Barbara. I pay for Premium, but I would be honest with you in saying that I use it most from a messaging perspective when I'm dealing with larger scale clients. My biggest resource is hunter.io. That's my biggest resource because I want to find email addresses of people. So I go to hunter.io is where I find the email addresses that I need because I don't find those on LinkedIn, unfortunately. So if you're on a limited budget, I wouldn't pay. Hunter.io. If you're on a limited budget, I wouldn't pay for LinkedIn Premium. I would pay for other things. But hunter.io will give you the naming convention. Barbara, how you can go to about any website and find out what their .com name is?
Yes.
Okay. And then you can just go and type that .com name into hunter.io. It'll give you the naming convention. You don't have to pay. There's, it's either going to be, for example, it's going to be like B Frida, or it's going to be Barbara.Frida at, there's only if it'll tell you the naming convention on that.
Okay.
But then the other thing is, remember, friends, if you call on an advertiser and they actually pick up and they don't know you, that's probably not going to be a lucrative advertiser. Just think that through, because if they're picking the phone up thinking you're a customer, more than likely that's going to be a minnow client. So, everybody just kind of consider that. And then the other thing, if you're looking for bigger clients, I like to go over to agencycompile.com. Now, dealing with ad agencies, oh my, if you want to raise your blood pressure, start there. Agencycompile.com. They'll try to sell you stuff. Don't buy anything. But you can find that over agencycompile.com is where you can find agencies of record for larger clients.
Okay.
But I recognize, Elise, I recognize that there's a lot of folks on the call that are shoppers, that are, free, etc. A lot of times that's tough for agencies to want to get involved. I get it.
Yeah. That's who we are.
What's that?
That's who we are.
Yeah. So friends, just remember, there's a lot of different fish out there, a lot of different ways to cook all those fish, fry all those fish, and skin all those fish. Just think about, hey, what is one thing I can do different from this conversation to be bigger, badder, and better today? And then this is what I'll leave you with. And I say it all the time in the podcast. If advertising sales was easy, everybody be doing it. And they're not. We're not crazy. We're the chosen few. And hey, friends, I very proudly can tell you, I pretty much go where I want and eat what I want because of media sales, pretty much, within reason, and it's fed my family successfully for 30 years. I've only been broke twice and not in the last few years. So I really believe in community media, and I think we all should as well.
Okay.